everyone. I'm Kareth, and I'm so glad you're joining me in my kitchen today. If you're new to my channel, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. Today's recipe is for a meal in a jar version of Italian wedding soup, including the meatballs. On my channel, I like to make lots of meals in jars because I like to have them prepped and kind of ready on my pantry shelf for whenever I need them. They make for a quick and easy homemade meal. So for the recipe today, I'm going to be using two different jars, one for the soup ingredients and one for the meatballs. And for the soup, I am going to be using both chicken and beef bouillon, as well as the mirepoix. And I'm using kale, but you could definitely use spinach if you prefer. Those little pearl-shaped pastas I found in the Hispanic section of my grocery store. Now for the meatballs. If you don't want to go to the trouble and actually make meatballs, you could probably put the meat, the sausage, and the beef just in with the soup ingredients and cook it and eat it like that. I'm sure it would be delicious. But traditional Italian wedding soup has meatballs. So we're going to make meatballs today. I want to show you you can do that with Thrive Life freeze-dried ingredients. So let's get started. We're going to start with the meatball jar. And I'm making a giant pot of soup today, so keep that in mind. You could definitely scale down this recipe. And to the jar, we're going to add all the ingredients you need to make the meatballs. But the meat, you have to pulse it in the blender. It will not refresh in time if you don't. It needs to be a lot smaller. The pieces need to be a lot smaller in order for it to refresh. You don't want crunchy meatballs, so pulse the meat. The eggs and the breadcrumbs will act as binders. If you don't want to use breadcrumbs, let's say you're trying to do gluten-free and you're going to use a gluten-free pasta, you could substitute instant oats and put those in the blender and they would work as a binder as well. Those are just some regular seasonings and that's really it. That's all you're going to put into your meatball jar. All right, let's move on to the soup. I've got a 24-ounce jar here. That's a pint and a half. You could definitely use a quart-sized jar if you don't have one of these. But I'm going to put the entire bag, all 7 ounces of those pearl-shaped pastas. You could use any kind of tiny little pasta. I've seen stars and little alphabet ones. That would be cute too. But they do expand. So warning, you will have a lot of pasta if you use the entire bag, which I like, but you could cut that in half if you prefer. And then the mirepoix, which is the onions, carrots, and celery, that's going to give your soup a great base flavor. Since this is Italian soup, we're going to put garlic in there. And I'm using both beef and chicken bouillon today because the restaurant where we eat this, the local little family-owned restaurant that makes a really good Italian wedding soup, they told me they use both in their recipe. So that's what I'm kind of basing this recipe on, is what theirs tastes like. And if you're going to store this for the long term, be sure to include an oxygen absorber. And there you have it. Aren't those cute? Just look at those layers. I think this is a really, really pretty meal in a jar. If you do use the breadcrumbs, be sure to look on the bottom of the can of the breadcrumbs and find out what your expiration date is. Mine was 1.5 years out. So if I was going to keep this on my shelf, I would note that on the lid. I would put a use by date on there. But I'm not going to keep it on the shelf. I'm going to make this with you right now. So when you're ready to make the soup, start with the meatballs. Just get a medium-sized bowl and empty out the contents of the jar into the bowl, and you're going to have to add 1/2 cup of hot tap water. It needs to be hot because hot water will refresh those meats a lot faster than cold water. And this is the only opportunity you're going to have to refresh those meats. So be sure it's hot, mix it really well, and then set it to the side and let it rest. In the meantime, go ahead and start to make your soup. You'll need a large soup pot. I'm using my Dutch oven here. And you'll just empty the contents of your soup jar into the pot. And then you're going to need to add 10 cups of water. I'm going to say if you use that entire bag of pasta, add 10 to 12 cups of water. If you don't, you just won't have enough broth in your soup. So it seems like a lot of water, but it works out really well. Go ahead and get some heat on there and start to bring that to a boil. After about 10 minutes, I checked on my meatball mixture and see how thick that gets? That means that it has completely absorbed all the hot water that you put in there. So it's ready to form into meatballs. Now I got my smallest cookie scoop, and I'm not even filling it all the way. That's probably 3/4 of the way full. But I went ahead, and a cookie scoop's the easiest way to do it, and it made 24 meatballs. I went ahead and rolled them together between my hands because you need to give these guys as much help as possible to stay together. You're not dealing with raw meat here, you're dealing with cooked meat, so they act a little bit different than if you were just making meatballs from raw meat. So give them a little bit of a head start and roll them, and then put them in the freezer until your soup is ready. That will help them hopefully stay together and just not disintegrate when they hit that hot liquid. I realized I had forgotten to put salt in my soup. You need salt. You're going to put 10 to 12 cups of water in there, so you need salt in addition to the bouillon powders, okay? Let that cook for 10 to 12 minutes and then taste test and see if your pasta is tender and if your carrots are tender. That is when you'll know that it's ready. When your carrots and your pasta are tender, then go ahead and add in your meatballs. Those had been in the freezer for probably 12 minutes at that point. When you first add them to your soup, you're going to need to be gentle as you stir, and they will sink, but that is normal. After about 5 minutes of simmering, I brought it back to a boil, and then after about 5 minutes of simmering, they started to float, and that's when you know they're done. See? How about that? We've got meatballs. Now these meatballs, y'all, they are very tender. They're super soft. They have a different texture. They don't have the same kind of bounce that you would get if you had made them from raw meat. They are tender, but they're delicious. Now it's ready to serve. If you make the same size meatballs, I made about the size of a pecan. If you make 24 meatballs and you're serving 4 people, then everybody gets 6 meatballs. I've seen some people that make these and they're tiny. So you could make even smaller meatballs. It's just up to you. But we like to top them with some fresh Parmesan. That really nice salty bite from the Parmesan is a great complement to the soup. And you can see that kale and the carrots, that gorgeous broth, and of course the meatballs. And as far as taste goes, it's spot on for the little family-owned Italian restaurant that we go to. It's delicious. In fact, my daughter, my college daughter, Hallie, who usually orders that soup, she loved it. She ate it 2 days in a row, and she said, "Mom, it's a 10 out of 10. So that's high praise from my college daughter, Hallie. So how about that? I was very pleased with it, and I think you will be too if you give this a try. Please let me know if you make this. Tell me how you like it in the comments. I appreciate it when y'all comment. And as always, I will leave my shopping link and the full recipe down in the video description box below. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks guys for joining me. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. And y'all be blessed. And until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.